Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning everyone. We are from Group 7 and today we are going to present our topic entitled Acquisition of Discourse in the Context of Learning. In this presentation, we will discuss how discourse is not only about grammar but also about how language is used in context, especially in classroom interactions. So before we begin, let me introduce our group members first. So on this slide, you can see the members of our group. Our group consists of Masita as the first presenter, Razlienda as the second presenter, Lisda Aurelia as the third presenter, and me, myself, Muhammad Fathan Ardiansyah, as the moderator of this group. So each of us will explain different parts of the presentation. So the first material will be explained by Masita as the first presenter. So I would like to hand over the time to you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thanks to moderator for giving me the opportunity. First of all, introduce myself. My name is Masita. I will explain my background in my material. The background is a language is not only a grammatical system but a social practice used in context. MC Carty explained that meanings is created through the relationship between language and context. Johnstone defines discourse as a language in USE that constructs a reality. In education, schools helps students develop academic discourse and identify G, while classroom interaction patterns like ERV, heart, influence how discourses is produced. Therefore, discourse acquisitions is a multidimensional process in all in context, interaction, and identify. And I move to the slide research question. The first, how is the concept of discourse explained from the perspective of Michel MC Carty, Barbara Josens, and Malcolm Cohn-Hertz, and James Paul G. And the second, how does the structure of classroom interactions influence a student's acquisition of discourse? And the last, how is the process of discourse acquisition manifested in the teaching and learning practice? Objectives of the study. First, to explain the concept of discourse based on four theoretical perspectives, and the second, to analyze classroom interaction as a stage for discourse acquisition, and the last, to identify the pedagogical implications for language teaching and learning. Okay, in the next slide, I will explain the theoretical framework of our study. In this section, we ask for main perspective to understand discourse, namely from MC Carty, Johnstone, Cohn-Hertz, and G. First, according to MC Carty, discourse is a closely related to cohesion and coherence. Cohesion refers to how parts of a text are connected, such as through conjunctions, reference, and repetition. Meanwhile, coherence is about how meaning is understood by the reader or listener. So, a text can be grammatically correct but still unclear if it lacks proper context or meaning. Next, according to Johnstone, discourse is a language in USE. This means that a language is always used within a social context and is influenced by situation, roles, and relationship. Moreover, discourse does not only reflect the words but also constructs constructs a reality. Then, according to Coulthard's, a classroom interaction has a clear structure, especially the EIRV patterns. In Initiations, a response and feedback. The teacher asks a question. The students response and the teacher gives feedback. These patterns helps manage the class, but sometimes in it limits students to short answer. Last, according to G, discourse is not only about a language but also about identify. He distinguishes between primary discourse, which is a learner in the family, and as secondary discourse, which is a learner in school. A student learns academic language and begins to build their academic identity. Next slide, I will explain theoretical synthesis. After discussing these four theories, it can be concluded that the acquisition of discourse is a multidimensional process. Discourse consists of several dimensions: the textual dimension from encyclicality, which focuses on cohesion and coherence; the social dimension from Johnstone, which emphasizes the role of social context; the structural dimension from Coulthard, which explain interactions patterns such as IRV; and the identify dimension from G, which is related to the development of academic identify. The four dimensions are interconnected and cannot be separated without cohesion. A text lacks structures. Without a social context, meaning becomes unclear. Without varied interactions, students' discourse development is limited, and without academic identify, language learning does not reach its deepest purpose. The first discourse acquisitions not only about understanding language, but also about how students use a language in context, interact with others, and develop their academic identify. I think that's all for me. I'm waiting for the moderator.
Okay, so that was the explanation by our first presenter, which is Masita, and now we will move over to the next material that will be explained by our second presenter, which is Razlienda. The time is yours.
Hello, my name is Razlienda from class B, and I will continue the next material. My material is chapter 3, the learning context. Overview of the learning context. In this chapter, we explore how the learning context serves as a specialized space for discourse acquisition. It is important to recognize that the learning context is not merely a physical location, it is a fundamental factor in shaping academic discourse. Especially, discourse is acquired through three primary pillars. The first one is social interaction. This involves the mastery of social practices and norms within the classroom, where language is used to construct academic reality. And the second is classroom structure. This refers to the systematic and hierarchical organization of communication, which dictates how information is exchanged. And the last is institutional rules. This pillar highlights the structured relationship between teacher and student, where institutional goals and curriculum demands shape the language used. And the next is the classroom as social practice and interactional structure. Building on those pillars, let's look at how they manifest in daily practice. The first one is the classroom as social practice. The classroom is a social environment governed by specific rules and roles. Here, students learn to interact academically according to institutional norms. As Barbara Johnston states, discourse does not just reflect the world, it actively constructs it. And the second is interactional structure in learning. The classroom communication typically follows the IRV pattern. In addition, the teacher initiates the interaction, usually with a question. Respond. The student provides an answer. Feedback. The teacher evaluates or provides feedback on that answer. The third is cohesion and coherence. Students move beyond basic grammar to master two key textual elements. Cohesion, connecting sentences structurally using linking words. Coherence, ensuring ideas follow a logical progression to create clear meaning. The next is the fourth, uh, power dynamics and participation. In the setting, the teacher holds epistemic authority controlling the topic, turn-taking, and evaluation. However, increasing student participation is essential for better discourse development. The fifth is school as an arena of secondary discourse based on the theories of James Paul G. The school is where students learn secondary discourse, the specialized academic language required for formal institution. Through this, students develop their academic identity. And the last is synthesis of the learning context. To summarize, the learning context is a multidimensional space involving social, roles and norms, structural, the IRF, interaction patterns, textual, cohesion and coherence, identity, the mastery of academic discourse. All these aspects work together to facilitate successful language and identity transformation. Okay, I think that's enough. Thank you so much.
Okay, so that was the explanation by our second presenter, and now we will move to our last material that will be explained by our third presenter, which is Lisda Aurelia. The time is yours.
Alright, now we move to chapter 4, which is the case study. In this chapter, the focus on an in-depth analysis of how discourse acquisition actually happens in learning. And this analysis based on two types data. The first is oral classroom interaction and the second is students' written text. And both types of data are analyzed using four main perspectives from the theories discussed before. And these are interactional structure by Coulthard, and cohesion and coherence by McCarty, and social context by Johnston, and the last is academic identity by G. So, through this case study, we can clearly see that discourse acquisition is not only theoretical, but it can be observed directly in classroom practice. Now I will explain the first part, which is case study 1, oral classroom interaction. Description of the situation. The learning situation takes place in a classroom discussion about climate change. In this context, the teacher acts as a facilitator but still controls the interaction. And this shows that classroom communication is not like daily conversation, but it follows in situational rules. So, and from the transcript, we can see the interaction clearly. The teacher asks, why has climate change become a global issue? Then student answers, because the earth temperature is increasing. After that, teacher asks again, explain the impact in moral detail, and the student give a longer response explaining cause and effect. And so these interactions show how students move from a simple answer to more complex explanation. Next, we move to interactional structure analysis based on Coulthard. According to Coulthard, classroom interaction follows the IRF patterns. First, initiation, where the teacher asks question. Second, response, where the student answer. And third, feedback, where the teacher evaluates or asks for a clarification. And in the first response, the student give a very short answer, and this show that IRF can sometimes limit students' discourse. However, in this case, the teacher does not directly evaluate the answer but instead asks the student to explain more. And this kind of feedback is very important because it encourages the student to produce a longer and more complex discourse. So, in the structure or of interaction can either limit or develop student discourse depending on how the teacher responds. Now I will explain in-depth linguistic analysis based on McCarty. In the first response, the student says because the Earth's temperature is increasing, and this is only a subordinate clause and does not have a complete main clause. It also depends on the teacher's question to be understood. And this show ellipsis where the part of the sentence is omitted and meaning depends on context. And in the second response, the student produced a more complex explanation. For example, if the temperature increases, polar ice melts, and levels rise, so many coastal areas are threatened. And here we can see several conjunctions like if, and so. This create logical relationship between ideas. So the second response shows stronger cohesion and clearer coherence because the ideas are connect in a logical sequence, cause, effect, and consequence. Next, social context analysis by Johnstone. From the social perspective, we can see that the student starts using more academic language. For example, words like sea levels, and coastal areas are not everyday language, but scientific or academic terms. And this show that the student is adapting to the classroom context where more formal language is expected. And next, academic identity analysis by G. From G's perspective, this also show the development of academic identity. And the study is not only giving information, but also organize the ideas in a structural way, especially using cause and effect relationship. And this indicates that the student is beginning to analyze secondary discourse, which is the type of discourse used in academic and in situational context. Now we move to case study 2 and the overall synthesis. Case study 2, written text analysis. The data is a short text about air pollution in big cities. And structural analysis of the paragraphs. The paragraphs has a clear structure. First, a thesis statement, then the cause, followed by the effect, and finally a solution. And these show a basic argumentative structure. And the next, cohesion analysis. The student use repetition like air and connectors such as a result, and therefore this help connect the sentence clearly. Next is coherence analysis. The ideas are logically organized from problem to solution. There are no sudden change, so the text is easy to understand. And identity and secondary discourse. The student is able to state an opinion, give reason, and make a conclusion. And this show a participation in academic discourse. And general synthesis of the case study. From both case studies, we can conclude that discourse acquisition develop Gradually, students move from simple response to more complex ones, use better cohesion and coherence, and begin to use academic language and reasoning. So, discourse acquisition is not only about grammar, uh, but about developing meaning, structure, and identity.
Okay, so that was the explanation by our third presenter. Now, let's move to the conclusion section. First, the conceptual conclusion shows that discourse is not just language at the sentence level, but language that used in context. It includes cohesion, social meaning, structure, and identity. Second, from the learning context, we can understand that the classroom is not a natural space. The interaction patterns such as IRF can either limit or support students in developing their discourse. Therefore, students need more opportunities for interaction and elaboration in order to develop their discourse ability more effectively. Next, based on the case study, we can see that students show gradual progress in their discourse development. They move from simple responses to more complex ones, with better cohesion, clearer structure, and the use of academic language. This indicates that students are starting to develop their academic discourse through learning activities. And finally, in the last conclusion, discourse acquisition can be seen as a transformation process. It is not only about learning language, but also about developing identity and ways of thinking. This process requires an interactive and meaningful learning environment where students are actively involved in communication and discussion. Alright, that brings us to the end of our presentation. So, thank you very much for your attention. We hope this presentation can give you a better understanding about discourse acquisition in learning. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.